Welcome to our Sound for Video session. It is the 7th of January, 2017, and we have some Q&A this week. So some of you submitted some questions. Let's take a look at them. Can't promise I can answer all of them, but in cases where I can't, I'll look around and see if we can find someone else that can help you out there. We had some really great questions. Let's take a look here. Actually, before I start, a couple of things. Happy New Year to everybody. Also, I'm coming to you from... There's a storm going on outside right now. I don't know if you can hear. I'm using a dynamic mic, so you may not be able to hear, but I'm in a corner bedroom, and the wind is really whipping around the corner here. So if there's some whistling and stuff, I apologize. It was funny. I actually posted a review of a shotgun microphone a couple days ago, and one of the pieces of feedback I got from people was, from one person at least, was, hey, it would have been nice if you had done more testing with this outdoors. The reality is that yesterday morning, it was minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit where I live. I'm up in the Rocky Mountains in Utah, and I'll get back to that in the spring. I wanted to do some testing outdoors, but it's a little on the chilly side right now, so we'll do that a little later. Let's jump into the questions here. First of all, from Michael, for your next session, can you talk about how to use the graphic phase shifter in Audition for dealing with asymmetry? Absolutely. Let's take a look here. First of all, what is asymmetry here? We have a waveform. This is just a recording of my voice. My voice actually, on a lot of microphones, tends to be asymmetric. What do I mean by that? Let's kind of zoom in a little bit here on this particular part of the waveform. You can see here, this one's peaking at almost minus 10 dB full scale. And on the opposite side of that same waveform, it's peaking at about minus 16 or so. So that's what we would call asymmetric. Now, it's different than DC offset. Some people confuse DC offset with asymmetric waveforms. DC offset is when you're kind of, when the waveform settles down, it actually doesn't settle on the minus infinity line. That's DC offset. We don't have that problem in this particular waveform. We just have asymmetry. Now, the problem with asymmetry is that it's not necessarily a problem, but it can be a problem, and let me explain why. When you go to loudness normalize this, let's just pump up the amplitude here. Notice this. We're actually clipping on the top side of the waveform well before we come anywhere close on the bottom side. And that's really where asymmetry can become a little bit of a problem. Typically, you'll find asymmetry on some men's voices. You'll also find it with some brass instruments, some woodwind instruments. So it's not terribly common, but you'll come across it from time to time. The question is, how do you fix this or address this and kind of even it up without changing the sound? It turns out you can do that. You can make this more symmetrical without affecting the sound, and you do that by a process that's normally called phase rotation. So in Audition here, it doesn't come with any sort of tool that automates this process for you. So you're kind of on your own. You have to do a little bit of manual work here. And if you come into Effects, down to Stereo Imagery, and then go to the Graphic Phase Shifter, we have a little tool here that will help us do this. Typically, where I like to do is come to the preset plus 90 degrees. That's a starting point. Go ahead and run that, and let's see what happens. Almost nothing happened. So that's not going to work. So I Command-Z, undo that. Let's go back in and try that again. Graphic Phase Shifter. Now, at this point, it's going to be a little bit of some guesswork here. What I like to do is get rid of this, this point right here. It's just going to get in our way. So I right-click and choose Delete Point. Now, what I want to do is I just want to 90 degrees, rotating the waveform 90 degrees did not fix the issue, and we're not going to get into all of the details about what that means exactly. This is all covered in my post-processing course in a lot more detail, so hopefully for those of you that want to dig in more, that'll be a help to you. But I'm going to bump this up to about where are we at here? 126, that's good enough, I think. 126. Let's try that and see what happens now. You'll notice here now this seems a lot more even. Now we're peaking at about minus 12 on that side and about minus 12 on this side. And that's probably good enough. That's enough so that you're not going to run into as many of those issues where you're clipping on one side and not anywhere close to 0 dB on the other side. So what you can do now is you can do whatever compression you need to do, loudness normalize, and you're on your way. So Michael, I hope that was helpful for you. All right, let's bump down to the next question. Paul asked the question, do do you the ideal list for low or big budgets for filmmaking? I think what is being asked here is, what are some of your recommendations for gear for low budget filmmaking and higher budget or big budget filmmaking? Let me say this first of all. Let me give you some definitions. Low budget, and we're going to kind of group no budget into that as well, because a lot of us are doing no budget projects. That is, we're completely self-funding. We're buying the gear ourselves, and we're not making any money from this. Low budget is maybe somewhere in the, I don't know, $15,000 to $20,000 and less. I know that's a generous look at low budget, but that's, I guess, kind of the reality. And then there's big budget, and big budget is multi-million-dollar productions in Hollywood and things of that nature. I've never worked on a big budget film, incidentally, so I can only tell you what I've heard from other people. So I'll tell you what I know from that. Let me actually direct you to a couple of videos. I'll have links for them down below. One is about microphones. The other one is about recorders. I talk about a variety of them. I don't talk as much about the high end, just a little bit. My main recorder, for example, is a Sound Devices 633, and that's getting into the professional range, definitely. And then a lot of them that we cover are actually more consumer and prosumer level recorders. So that hopefully, Paul, will give you some sense. Let me just say this. When I'm doing something that I'm getting paid for, I'm usually using, in most of those cases, it's going to be a documentary type film. My kit is going to include the Sound Devices 633. I may use one or two lavaliers. I will use a boom microphone for the lavaliers. Right now, I'm looking to upgrade to some more professional quality wireless kits, but I haven't made the jump yet. Still working on that. So right now I'm just using Rode Link, and Rode Link works reasonably well. I haven't had a problem with it. I don't love the lavalier microphone that it comes with, but I also do have some Sanken COS 11D lavalier microphones that I do use with the Rode Link, and that works nicely. I don't do a lot of shooting outdoors, even for my paid work. So, and even when I do, I'm generally using my Audio-Technica AT4053B, which is a small diaphragm condenser mic, hypercardioid pickup pattern. And if I'm going outdoors, I'll put that in a Rycote Cyclone. And I'll try to put links for all of these down below so you can see what I'm talking about. I've got a K-Tech boom pole that I'm using. I've got an Orca OR30 bag along with the vest harness that I used. I used that on a recent shoot. So for me, if I'm working from a bag, that's kind of my pro level kit. That's still in the low budget range, to be honest. I think once you get into the big budgets, most of the mixers are going to have sound carts. So they'll have either custom made carts or, these carts that cost quite a bit of money, that they're set up with a mixer. They may have a mixer with linear faders, which can cost easily $10,000 depending on the one they're using, or they may have one that is made, say for example, both Sound Devices and Zaxcom make mixing boards that you can integrate with their recorders. So sometimes they'll be using those. They'll have all sorts of wireless setups. They'll have shark fin antennas. They'll have all sorts of stuff going on. So big budget's an entirely different world, and there's a lot of other stuff going on there. But low budget, I mean, on the low end, the lowest I would go in terms of recorders, if you want quality, is a Tascam DR-60D Mark II. And in terms of microphones, I've had pretty good luck with the Rode NTG2. What I would not do is, and I would stay away from this, but because there's so many people that have tried this, the Zoom H4n, the original one, is not a good combination with the Rode NTG2. Just stay away from that. It'll be nothing but frustration and lots of noise, just because the H4n just doesn't have enough gain for that kind of mic. So there are just a ton of options out there. I'll put a link for those other two videos. I hope that's helpful for you. Thanks for the question, Paul. Next up, Kevin Edwards. Hi, Curtis. I have a question. I hope you'll be able to help. I have a number of possible location recording setup options, but I was wondering if I was to use my Sound Devices MM1, which I use when using a boom. Let me pause there. For those of you that are not familiar with the Sound Devices MM1, this is a small preamplifier. I believe it's purely analog. And typically, or what it was actually designed for, is for a boom operator to wear on his or her belt. And it actually amplifies the boom microphone. And then you run a line level signal from the MM1 to the sound mixer. So that's what it was originally designed for. Let's see what Kevin's using it for here. If I was to use my Sound Devices MM1, which I use when using a boom, this enables me to not only power whichever microphone, but also monitor what I'm sending to camera/mixer. And that's exactly, I think, what it was designed for. The MM1 outputs line level, which I step down to 30 dB. Now to the question. And I'm not entirely clear on why you're stepping it down to 30 dB, but maybe that'll make more sense here. I've just ordered a Tascam TR, or I think you mean DR, maybe that was a typo on my side, I'm not sure, DR-10CS to trial as a safety precaution when using G3s. He's talking about Sennheiser wireless G3s, after watching a review on the 10L. So, would it be possible to connect from the MM1, again, this is the Sound Devices preamplifier, using a correct cable into the Tascam, which is a micro recorder, before using its outfeed to the G3 EW100 transmitter? Is that possible? I think that is possible. And yes, you will need an adapter cable because I think you're probably coming out of the MM1 on a 1/4-inch line level TRS, balanced TRS. You're going to go into the Tascam with an unbalanced. And I think your question is, the reason asking for this advice, I would think there's some kind of power outputted by the Tascam to power the lavs, and I don't wish to damage the MM1's outputs. Yes, okay. Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. On the DR10L, there is a menu item to turn off the bias power. They call it bias power. It's sometimes called plug-in power. It's 3 to 5 volts. On the 10L, you can definitely turn it off. I assume on the 10CS you can as well, but you'll just want to check that. If you turn that off, I think you'll be just fine. And I think that's your question. So I hope that helps. Let us know what you find, Kevin. That was a good question. Next one is from Anna Corey. Hi, Curtis. I have this dialogue in a screenplay where two characters are talking outdoors at a normal voice sound level, but at one point during their argument, one of the characters talks much quieter, and I was wondering if you were the sound person on set for that scene and you were to record this with your Tascam and your NTG4 boom mic, what would you be doing on the technical side to make sure that the dialogue on screen will still keep the dynamic range of sound levels that happen when two people are talking, and at the same time, to make sure to record this in such a way that for the screen we can hear all perfectly well and distinctively? Hope my question makes sense. Thank you. Yes, it makes sense, definitely. Here is an interesting thing. Now, if I don't know who's doing the photography work on this piece, I learned something interesting from Jeff Wexler. If you're not familiar with Jeff Wexler, he is a sound mixer who's worked on lots of large budget films. He's actually the son of Haskell Wexler, who died just earlier this year, I believe, who was a director. A director of photography. I think it depends on how this scene is being shot. So, for example, are you cutting between angles? Are some of them closer, some of them farther away? Because the first thing that comes to mind here is if they're arguing and you go to a wider shot, probably the most natural thing to do is to pull the boom mic away a little bit for a couple of reasons. Because if you go to a wider shot, psychologically it makes sense for the boom mic to pull back a little bit and to sound just a little bit farther away. And then if you have the scene where they're talking much more quietly, oftentimes what the director of photography will do is they will actually do a tighter shot on the actors. And in that case, you may want to move the boom microphone in, not only because they're quieter, but also because it's a tighter framed shot and it's meant to sound and feel more intimate. So that's the main thing I would focus on. Now, if it's just a static camera shot and it's all done at the same angle, you can still move the mic in and out a little bit just to kind of give that effect, that feel. But that's the main thing I would do from a more creative standpoint. I'm wondering what you're asking, what I would do on the technical side. I guess that's partly technical, partly creative. On the technical side, I would do the same things I normally do. I would first, I would be hand booming. That would help a lot. Number two, all the normal things you do for gain staging. You know, this is a little bit trickier with a recorder like the Tascam DR-60D Mark II, which is again a decent recorder. You don't have quite the dynamic range that you may have on some other recorders, but you should still be able to get a very good, clean recording here. I think that's where you are going to need to move the boom in and out. So in the quiet, you're going to need to move the boom in a little bit. When they get louder, you move it back. And I think that's actually the main thing. That's the main impression I have here. But in terms of gain staging, you're going to want them to run through the scene first. You may have to do multiple takes. Go ahead and record the first take, but you're going to use that first take to also make sure you have the gain set right. And you may have to use the faders a little bit as well, or the fader for the boom. So that's those are my main pieces of advice. I hope that's helpful. If I missed what you were asking for, go ahead and let me know, and we'll take another crack at that. Thanks again. All right, Greg Duffy. Greg, I will be honest. Let me go ahead and read your question. I don't have an answer for this just yet, but I have a couple thoughts. Hi, Curtis. I've recently purchased your courses. They've been a tremendous help. Thank you. I use Final Cut Pro 10 to edit industrials, and it's always been a bit difficult getting audio from Final Cut Pro 10 into Audition. I hear you. With this latest release, it seems even harder. I use X to CC, which is a little application that I also use, actually. It's a third-party application. But with it not handling compound clips and multicam very reliably, I'm having a hard time. Any tips or workflows to ease the movement of audio from Final Cut Pro 10 to Audition? Now, depending on the industrial piece that you do, I'll be honest, on very short pieces, I know which takes I'm going to use as I'm kind of organizing all my footage and my audio clips. And I actually process them first, and then I bring them into Final Cut Pro 10 and sync them together there. That only works for short pieces. If you have a lot of material, that's not a feasible approach, and I realize that. So I don't know what you mean by industrials. I assume you mean commercials, and if they are short pieces, that's mainly what I do. Now, a lot of us assume, and I have assumed this for a long time as well, until it kind of finally occurred to me on short pieces I could do it differently. But normally the workflow overall is, you give the production audio to the editor, even if that's yourself. They sync it up with the clips, they do the edit, and then they assume, okay, it's time to do the audio finishing. That is, I think, generally works really well when you're working on a longer piece or when you have a ton of source material and you don't want to have to process it all and then do the edit, because that's not very it's not time efficient. But if you do have a very short piece and you can pick the clips that you're going to use up front because you're going to be editing as well and you're making those decisions, then you can actually do all of the audio finishing first and then sync it up in Final Cut Pro 10, and then you don't have to do the audio at the end. That's one thing. I don't know if that's going to work for you since you're doing multicam and compound clips. Let me think about that. Yeah, no, that could still work. Anyway, that's just one thought. Secondly, when I do X to CC, typically I'm not doing a lot of multicam because these are my own short little pieces. So I don't have unfortunately, any advice on that front, and perhaps I might contact the guys that make X to CC and see if they might be willing to come on and talk with us a little bit about that. Same with compound clips, not something I do. Most of the editors I'm working with are actually cutting in Premiere, and so for me, they provide an OMF, and it's pretty easy. I mean, those OMFs are messy. You get them at first, and I sync up, I have all the source audio clips because I did the production audio on those pieces, or they send them to me, as the case may be, and they're messy, but it's pretty straightforward to clean them up. Like what'll happen a lot of times is I'll get 4 tracks of the same exact thing, and it's just a matter of deleting the ones I don't need, stuff like that. So in that case, X to CC seems to work. Oh, sorry, actually, in that case, I'm not even using X to CC. I just have an OMF. So in any case, let me see if maybe the thought, if you are doing those short pieces, maybe that'll help you. If not, let me know. Perhaps we can contact the guys that made X to CC and have them on and see what they have to say. Maybe they have some tips for us. So thanks for the question, Greg. Next up, we have Matt Gray. Hi, Curtis. I thought very highly of the Zoom H6 until I recently compared it to my new Zoom F8. When I tested both with a Rode NTG2, the quality of F8's preamps clearly stood out to me. How could there be such a difference in quality? And he did the test recordings at 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, same location, same gain. Matt, I don't know a whole lot about preamplifier design. I just know what my ears tell me. And what my ears tell me is that there are certain preamps that sound a whole lot better than others. And here's some guesses. I I think, first of all, there's a lot more engineering that goes into higher quality preamps. So there are engineers that understand audio and obviously understand electrical engineering really well and understand how to build quality or design quality preamplifiers. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the quality of the components that they put into the devices. On these kind of consumer level devices, they're using much lower quality components. And there's also the whole argument of you're just using an integrated circuit amplifier versus using discrete component amplifiers. There's just a lot about electronics that I don't understand, frankly. But I think I'm with you. When you go from something like a Zoom H6 or a Tascam DR-70D or whatever to something like a Zoom F8, there's a tremendous difference. And I guess at some level you get what you pay for too. So I don't want to discourage anyone. If you're recording with a Tascam DR60D Mark II or you're recording with a Zoom H5 or H6, just get out there and make the best that you can. Don't let the technical things get too much in the way. Make sure focus on story, focus on the message that you're conveying, focus on making the experience for your viewers as good as it can be. Now, at some point we all want to upgrade to a better recorder or mixer or whatever, and that's fine. But don't lose sight of what you're trying to do. In this question, Matt, it's great. I don't know any more beyond that, but I think there's a lot of different things they can do. I think a lot of the lower end recorders, the engineering effort that they put into it is a lot lower. Again, they're using like integrated circuits that are amplifier packages all on a chip, and the capabilities of those, those are usually meant for more consumer level devices and where the demands are not as high. So that's my guess. Hopefully that's helpful for you. So that's all the questions for this week. I hope those were helpful. Go ahead and leave any other questions you have down below the video here. And I guess I'll leave you by saying get out there and make some really great recordings. We'll talk to you again next week.